Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Amacid and we are back. 3.25 is nearly upon us. By the time this video launches, it'll be tomorrow. That's a login right there. Let's jump in to Atlas trees. Now this is what I'm gonna do for my league start. I will walk you through all of these trees. I've got a number of trees here you can see up here. We'll go through them all. I'll show you from the very beginning, i.e. this tree, all the way to what I would consider to be a juicer tree for running tier 16 maps. Now let's go ahead and jump in here. So this is the starter tree. Now this is what I would consider to be the basic form of what I'm gonna do, which is very similar to what I did last league, and it worked out pretty well. Now the most important thing here is of course unwavering vision. So I would generally speaking rush unwavering vision. Now you could go this way up the side and kind of take this path and avoid all this and add some points and respec these nodes later. If you want to rush this, that's totally an option. But alternatively, you could just go straight up the center, grab these Kirak nodes, and then go up through here and grab this. Now, Unwavering Vision is great because it gives you basically 20 free Atlas points. It's a little bit less valuable on the very get-go than it used to be because we're not taking Nico anymore, which we used to take here when we were going for Packed with Energy, but Packed with Energy has been nerfed. So Pack with Energy is not so good, so you're basically paying, these are all points you take, but you're basically taking 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 extra points to get 20, so you get 11 extra points on top of what you would do just at this core tree. Of course, that'll change once you get a little further, but anyway, this is the core. So the basic idea here is very simple. We're just taking all the Kirak nodes we can get. These are all really valuable, 2% per small. You get 6% here, and then the Scattering Report node is kind of useless for us, but we do get it. Otherwise, you're getting all of these map tier nodes, just get what you can. And that's kind of the basic idea here. Now, this is like a very standard basic tree. Again, I think that there's an argument to be made potentially about getting rid of Unwavering Vision, but I think it's still worthwhile, particularly as you continue to progress and just need those points early on. So there are a couple different strats that I'm going to probably switch between, run through. The first few are Scarabless strats, primarily because they're using Unwavering Vision, but also because when you're in the early game, you're not really using Scarabs, right? You're not using them until you get into like later tier maps, red tier maps, and going from there. So the first one here is an Expedition and Deli strat with no Scarabs, as you can see. That's in the name, and I will have all these linked in the description so you can see them. The basic idea is pretty straightforward. It's essentially an extension from the normal tree. You see we've still got Unwavering Vision. We've kind of taken a slightly different approach here, but it's more or less the same concept. We've got Kirak, we've got map nodes, we've got all of the expedition nodes we can possibly squeeze. The only thing I'll call out here is this is flexible, I'd say, but the idea here is you just don't want Gwenin at all costs. Gwenin is not what you're looking for. So besides that, we are guaranteeing Delirium on the map. The only node we didn't take here is this Unending Nightmares because this essentially bricks our loot from Delirium, which is part of the reason why we're taking it these days. So these nodes are really good up here too. Meant to actually have those. So there we go. That's good. 133 points, I would say, is roughly where you'd expect to be. So you're missing 19 maps. So you're probably missing a number of invitations, and you're probably missing several unique maps. But this is a fair place to strive for by the time you get into the end game. Now, there are a number of other trees here that have Scarabs, and we'll get to them, and they're kind of variations on this, but let's keep moving forward for a moment. So Expedition Legion, I think this is one I'm almost certainly going to try out early because my build is going to be very good for Legions and Expedition, but essentially it's the same idea here. This is very much a right side of the tree play because you can see Legion and Expedition are entirely on the right side of the tree. Again, we're still taking these map nodes because we're in the sustaining stage, 129. I feel like that's like a comfortable range. Again, like give or take 130 is a good range to like aspire to before you switch into a Scarab based strategy. So nothing too much to call out here. It's a relatively standard strat. The only thing I'll note is you can take this Expedition node here if you want. 4 extra points there. Basically, it's like a 20% damage buff against Expedition mobs, but I don't think it's necessary. So up to you. But generally speaking, these Legion nodes are good. You don't take the General node because the Generals are actually not good. You don't want to be fighting Generals. I also have Shrines here just to, again, make mapping a little easier. We're not taking Packed with Energy. There's certainly an argument to be taking Packed with Energy in general, despite it being nerfed. However, I didn't take it in any of my trees, and I'll be curious to see how people enjoy it, even with the nerf. But Shrines are a nice little boost as well to your damage to help you get through these Legions and these expeditions a little faster. Next one here, so this is more in my wheelhouse in terms of what I usually do on a league start. Blight and Ritual. I'm actual Ritual enjoyer for the first few days of the league. I would not keep this tree past like day 3 or day 4. Ritual drops off very hard, but you can get some very easy 5 and 6 links along with bases. They buffed Ritual bases this league. I think there's something to be said there. The primary goal here is just to get 4 rituals in your map. So this is the most important node here. There are a couple other good ones like this guy here, deferring cost reduced tribute. So that allows you to roll more because you're getting this. So it allows you to essentially defer, roll, and you can do that a little bit more frequently and see more loot. But Blight is kind of my bread and butter. I usually league start Blight. I don't know if I'm going to go with it this league, and I'll get into that in a little bit here, but in terms of like the initial league start before I get to the end game builds. But Blight is looking like a good potential strategy. I will say that Blight has changed in that Blight in maps is likely worse, but blighted maps themselves are likely stronger. You're not going to be able to get as many oils, high tier oils, as you could previously because of the removal of the blighted scarab of oils. As well as the removal of or changing of a couple nodes here. So Blight Spawn and Fungal Horizons do different things. You don't drop oil extractors anymore. You can't break down jewelry to get good, easy silvers and golds that way. So oils are going to be a little bit rarer in maps, but they're going to be a little bit probably easier to get, generally speaking, in blighted maps, which are stronger. So I will note here this Blight Spawn node. So Blight Spawn is going to make your maps very challenging. I think that it's not like a chance that a Blight lane becomes bosses. It's a guarantee. It's one lane of Blight encounters in your maps is guarded by only Blight bosses. I think we'll have to see how this node actually looks functionally. But I think if you were to take Blight Spawn in combination with Immune Response, you're gonna be in for a bad time unless you're prepped for it. So in an early map situation, which is where I would describe 130 points, you're still taking a Wavering Vision, you're not using Scarabs, I wouldn't take Blight Spawn unless you feel really, really good about your build. You're going to need a lot of damage to get through this, and I don't think most builds can do that at probably like day 2 or day 3 comfortably. You'll probably be failing a lot of Blights, which is not good, but we'll get into like a more juiced Blight strat here in just a second. Now, oops, there we go. Okay, now, so looking at what I'm going to likely be going for off the bat for my Scarab all-in strat. So I've got some notes here with options on Scarabs. Feel free to take a look there. I'm curious if you guys have any other configurations you think you're going to try. But basically, the idea here is we're going for Shrines on top of Expedition and Legion. Now, so this is basically another version of this tree, but with Scarabs. So let's go back here. So it's a similar concept. I think red altars are generally speaking a little bit safer early in the league. The map mods aren't as bad. Blue is going to give you more quant and things like that, but red is a pretty good bet to get good, easy, just bubblegum currency. You get a lot of chaos orbs, you get a lot of alks, things like that. So it's really, really easy to get red on your maps. So I'm going to go red. Now, the basic strategy is more or less the same, but let's go through the Scarabs here. So Expedition Scarab and Legion Scarabs just give you encounters. So Expedition Scarab is capped at 1, Legion Scarab is capped at 4. So you can do up to, and because there's a new map device slot, this is assuming you've unlocked it by this point, you've got all 6 slots. You can of course scale this down as necessary if you haven't, but this is basically like a very straightforward thing. You're not juicing your expeditions or legions in any particular way with additional Scarabs. You're purely just getting more of them. And I think this is a perfectly viable option. Legion Scarab of Officers is pretty much the only Legion Scarab I would recommend based on what I've seen and what we experienced last league. That's going to be Legion Scarab of Officers was very expensive though last league, so it's kind of like give or take. It's a toss up. If you can't afford it, don't buy it. Okay. And then the second option here I had listed here is Expedition Scarab and Expedition Scarab of Rune Finding. So Rune Finding was very cheap last league, but the caveat there is that Expedition itself was less valuable because Necropolis existed. So Expedition was just not maybe priced the way it's going to be priced this league. So we'll have to see. I mean, Expedition Scarab alone could be expensive. And if that's the case, you can always pivot, right? You can always just spec into, move some nodes around, get rid of Shrine maybe, and just spec into getting expeditions on your map guaranteed that way. That's certainly an option, but it will cost you a number of points. So looking here, Rune Finding is very strong. It basically gives you more monsters in your map, which means theoretically more logbooks. It means theoretically more currency or more reroll currency, which is very valuable. And then essentially 3 to 4 Legion Scarabs, depending on how many rune findings you have here. This one I already explained. It's officers and just basically more Legion, juicing Legion. And this guy here is kind of a hybrid. And you've got officers and you've got rune finding and you're doing Legion. This seems like a good option, but it might be, again, quite expensive to run, especially early League. Now, the last tree I want to share is, I think, an extremely powerful strategy, but you are going to need an absolute juicer build to do this. Now, this is Delirium and Blight. So let's talk through this a little bit. So Blight pauses Delirium. If you start a Blight encounter / you're near an ongoing Blight encounter, it will pause the Delirium, and it will juice your Delirium. So there's a couple notes here that I want to call out. The first one is Significant Troves. So Significant Troves, unique monsters in your maps have a 200% increased chance to drop Scarabs. Now, with Blight Spawn, which again we already talked through, you're getting theoretically many bosses in your Blights, especially if you run something like Toxic Sewer, which has a very condensed map. So you might end up with just a ton of mobs in a singular lane that's all bosses that are delirious. Like, you see where I'm going with this? Like, this is not going to be an easy map you're running. So once you get the damage, though, if you can nuke these Blight bosses down, now we're cooking, and you're going to get theoretically a ton of Scarabs this way. Now, there's an argument to be made that you could grab this node here as well, and maybe you drop again like a shrine node, or you drop something like something like that. You get where I'm going. Like, there's some room to experiment here. We're also taking blue to enhance quant, but basically the idea here is that you're running delirious Blights, which sounds like a special slice of hell, but I think it'll be pretty rewarding if you can pull them off consistently. Again, I think you're going to need a very strong build to run a strat like this, and it's certainly possible that the time investment into doing these maps ends up not being worth it, but I think Delirium is going to be potentially very powerful this league, with the reduction in waves needed for simulacrums. I think simulacrums are going to be very expensive relative to what they've been in the past, but I think this is a potentially very powerful atlas that you could use to make a ton of currency. However, you're going to need a very strong character. So in terms of the Scarabs here, so let's actually look through this. So Blightheart and Invigoration. So if we go to Blight, Blightheart is the new Scarab that has just landed in this 3.25 patch. But basically, Blight encounters an area have 1 blighted chest. So on Toxic Sewers, you'll probably have somewhere between 1 and 4 lanes on average, usually closer to 1 to 2. I think oftentimes I find that my Toxic Sewer Blights kind of sit in the middle of a room and then they split 2 ways, and sometimes 1 way, but sometimes you'll get unlucky and you'll get like 3 or 4 lanes, and that's just the way it goes depending on your placement. But so this is potentially to be just a singular chest, but the chest is going to spawn more waves of enemies, or the lane is going to spawn more waves of enemies, and the chest is going to get larger and larger as you kill more blighted enemies. Now, if you combine this with Blight Scarab of Invigoration, and you are getting blight mobs have an increased difficulty reward, I mean, again, this is going to be difficult. Let's not forget this. It's going to be difficult. And then optionally, I did note Blight Scarab of Blooming as an optional thing to get an additional 3 bosses. Uniques have 100% increased life. I'm not sure about this. This seems like it's going to make your life hell, and it certainly might not be worth it. But I am kind of curious how the math weighs out here. Blooming was pretty expensive last league. I did a strat using it, and I think they were like 30 or 40C per Scarab. So the cost alone might outweigh the benefits here. But I think there's some interesting combinations to be done here to try. And see how it goes, because you get an additional 3 unique bosses. That might be honestly negligible, but if Blight Ravaged maps are expensive, then it could be worth it, because you're going to get a ton of maps theoretically if you juice up your reward chest a lot with blighted mobs. So that's the basic idea. And then you drop a Delirium Scarab in just to guarantee your Delirium, because we're not taking any of those nodes. So little experimental, very difficult. I'm not going to be running this for quite some time. I might try it and then be like, I'm not strong enough to do this yet, and start over. But that's the basic idea. There's so many strats to try this league. I mean, the league mechanic alone is pretty robust, and that's obviously not on the tree. But I think there's a lot to do here. What do you guys think? What are you starting? Let me know. I am so hyped for 3.25. Like, I am crazy hyped. This is like one of the most hyped leagues in a very, very long time. And I'm excited to see you all there. And I will see you in the next video, which will be coming frequently now that the league has started. Bye. Goodbye. Bye.